Hi guys, today we're talking about the Percussion Revolver and a common problem, the broken trigger spring, trigger bolt spring. Stay with me. Hi guys, it's Blackie for Shaman's Forge. The Colt Percussion Revolver was a huge milestone when it came out for ruggedness, reliability of the day. Today we consider them a bit fragile. That's not necessarily the gun's fault. Part of that fault is our not understanding the design and modern manufacturing and price point money saving techniques has in many ways made the Colt a little less reliable than it was back in the day. Now what we're going to talk about is what the trigger bolt spring and its relationship does. Now as you know, this is the spring inside of the action that is a two-finger, one going onto the trigger, one working the bolt, so that when you cock the gun, it holds the trigger out of the sear out of the way, and it locks the bolt back in place when it comes into battery. That two-prong trigger, that spring. Now the problem: the original springs were real springs. They were spring steel, I should say. The modern ones rarely are. It's actually just a piece of flat steel stock that's been heat treated. And they're hoping the oil can-like effect will do the job. And to a point, it does. But like in my tune-up video, we talked about how if there's any wire edge anywhere on that spring, that's a weak point. But let's also now talk about how the design of the gun can break the spring if you're a little too heavy-handed. Let me zoom in the camera, and I'm going to take one that's already apart right here and show you what I'm talking about. Stay with me. Okay, here's a Colt taken apart. This is the trigger. This is the bolt in here. I know you're a little far away. We'll get to that. What I want you to see right now is the relative positions. Right here is the spring screw that retains that flat spring, and it's not in here right now. One tab comes up here to the side and holds the trigger down, so that as the trigger is moved, it pushes back on the front and resets the trigger. The other half comes right here and pushes on the front of the bolt so that it protrudes through the frame and thus locks up on the cylinder. The thing about it is where this screw is, there's a shelf for that spring to sit on. I'm going to loosen this spring, this screw, just a second. And what's going on is that shelf is supposed to hold this spring in a relative location. That means that it has to be a certain depth so that it's the right level to reach up and do the job. However, if when they milled this, and we're going to pretend that this is a end mill, and this is locked up in a frame, and it comes in and it mills in this channel right here. Suppose it was a little bit deep. What that's going to do is the tip of the trigger, the spring, instead of being a nice level, it's a little lower. That means when I torque down that screw, I'm putting this kind of tension on that spring. Instead of it being truly parallel, it's actually a little deeper. We're talking just a couple thousand, but that's enough to put a lot of stress right here on that spring. Now, let me zoom in ultra close and we'll talk about what to combat this with. Now, the screw that holds this down, the depth of it can actually go a little too deep. And so whenever we tighten it up too much, we're actually over torquing that spring. So what you should do to troubleshoot this is, one, I doubt you can see it, but there's a ridge right there inside that channel. When you look in your own, you're going to see it. There's a platform for that screw to sit on, and then there's an edge there. Make sure that that does not have a raised lip. That can break the spring. The other thing is you want to put the spring in, and then you want to gently turn this down snug, and then just a little bit more. You want the trigger to work, the bolt to work reliably, but you do not want this spring necessarily blood tight. It can't come out of this mortise. Whenever the trigger guard is in place, it blocks it. It can't unscrew and fall out. So you want to just snug it up good and snug. And you'll notice it's almost like tuning a guitar string. You're going to turn it X tight, work the action, and you'll see it's very reliable, or it's not quite working right. Then you got to add a little bit more. Once you figure out where to turn this screw to, I like to mark one edge of the screw, like the front edge up here, and then use it like a 12 o'clock so it points here or here or wherever it is that when I reach the tuning point, I'll put me a mark up there or something. So when I'm reassembling the gun after cleaning, I just automatically turn it to that mark so those two witness marks line up. The slot of the screw and a mark over here on the frame. That way I'm not over torquing that spring, and I'm also making sure I'm very consistent shot to shot. So, what this gives us by just adding enough tension to that screw to hold it firmly in place. What if the screw does want to back out, Blackie? That's easy to fix. Take some clear fingernail polish, put a drop on the thread, screw it into the correct position where it's lined up with your witness mark. It'll dry and be fine. That's what we used to use before they had Loctite. Works fine, and it will easily come out when you want to do it, but the screw won't move by itself. Now, remedies. You can eliminate a lot of these problems if you'll simply get a modern spring. The modern spring is a piece of piano wire, and it looks for all the world like a bent paper clip. How to get one? The action of the single action Army and the percussion revolvers is the same. Let me say that again. The action, the internal action of a single action Army and the Colt percussion revolvers is the same. So if I get a Pieta single action Army spring, it'll fit the 51 and 60 and 61 Navy. Let me say that again. If I get the piano wire spring for the Pieta manufactured single action Army, with a little fitting, it will fit 1860 Army, 1851 Navy, 1861 Navy. It will fit. All you got to do is, one of the tabs is a little long. That's the one that goes to the trigger. You put it in. If yours is a little bit long, you just simply file it across the end to make it short enough where it just sits on the shelf good. That's all you got to do. Very, very simple. And I'm going to be ordering one, and I'll show the fitting process to go into this old one. The trigger spring can be a real headache. Some guns, because of that shelf being made, leaving a wire edge, or being too deep, break a lot of springs. I see quite often guys will torque them down blood tight. The spring is putting the maximum amount of pressure, which makes your trigger pull go up, and the spring's life goes down. Just snug it up good and snug where everything works, but you could go a little further. And that spring may last 5 years. I hope this helps, guys. Please leave any questions or comments below, and if you haven't subscribed, please do. I'm Blackie for Shaman's Forge Woodscraft. Wishing you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.